it's very different what's going on in central India, as I just described, and this area of Kashmir. In Kashmir, it is not about staying in the Indian state. It is about separating from India. It is an independence movement at this point, and it has really crystallized over the last 20 or 25 years. It's, to give you a little bit of the historical background, I hope I'm not too pedantic here, but this was a state that had a Hindu Maharaja, a Hindu king, but the population was overwhelmingly Muslim. And when the partition of India occurred in 1947, when the British decided to quit India, it divided the country between a largely Muslim Pakistan and a largely Hindu India. The people of Kashmir, in great numbers, wanted to align themselves, and this would make geographical sense as well as, cultural sense. They wanted to align themselves with neighboring Pakistan. But the Hindu Maharaja, under pressure from Nehru, who was the first Prime Minister of India and who himself was of Kashmiri origin, and this is not to be underemphasized, because I think there was a very strong emotional pull for Nehru to keep Kashmir inside of India, even though he made multiple pronouncements that the Kashmiris could have a plebiscite, that they could freely choose between India and Pakistan. All of those things, of course, were swept under the rug once the Indian Army invades Kashmir on October 27th, 1947. So this has been a bone of contention initially between India and the newly formed state of Pakistan. Pakistan has about 1/3, that green area is also part of Kashmir. And the orange area that is the Pakistani part, is the green part. And the orange part under it is the Indian part. Now there's a section in the upper right-hand corner, you could see Aksai Chin and another area to its left. That is actually now under Chinese control. Part of it was given by Pakistan to China. China is an ally of Pakistan's. And part of it was seized by China in a war with India in 1962. That is the Aksai Chin area. These were all boundaries created by the British Empire. According to Tariq Ali, there could have been an amicable settlement between India and China over this border that was drawn by the British, as other borders in the region were drawn by the British, separating communities, separating resources from people. But India did not want to engage China in any kind of negotiation, because it's had a very hardline attitude about Kashmir. It calls it in Hindi an atut ang, which means an inseparable limb of the Indian Union. It cannot be cut off, and they keep using this rhetoric very much today to justify its occupation of Kashmir. So after 1947, there's a war is fought in Kashmir. The border, as it's seen now, sort of becomes the de facto border. It's called the line of control. Other wars are to follow, 1965, 1971. Many mini wars have occurred between Pakistan and India in this area, most notably in 1999 in an area called Kargil, which was very, very serious. Clinton was quite concerned about what may happen because both of these countries have nukes. As I said initially, the Kashmiris were overwhelmingly pronounced to be in favor of joining Pakistan. But over the decades, having seen what's what Pakistan has evolved into, basically a crumbling and crumbled state. It is not something desirable now for most Kashmiris. The people I talk to want independence. They don't want to join Pakistan or India. Of course, immediately the question is raised by India, well, it couldn't be a viable state. You know, not even addressing the fact that the right of self-determination is universally acknowledged and juridically encoded in the UN Charter. So the Kashmiris have a right to self-determination. But the position of Delhi, the government in India, is that it wouldn't survive as a state. Well, it would survive very well as a state, actually. That isn't a reason to deny self-determination. It has huge hydroelectric resources. Fully 80% of the electricity that's generated from Kashmiri water, which is extensive, the Himalayan glaciers are right there, light up northern India. So you have this bizarre situation when you're in Kashmir itself at night, you're in towns and villages, sometimes cities, and there's no electricity. There's complete blackout, while India, down here, is completely lit up with the hydroelectric power generated from Kashmiri water. So water is a major resource issue, and it's one of the reasons India does not want to, quote unquote, lose Kashmir. Historically also, it has been a rich area for tourism. I know many of you have been to Kashmir. It is spectacular. The famous Mughal Emperor Jahangir in the 17th century, there's a well-known couplet in Farsi that every Kashmiri will just quote to you like that if there's a heaven on earth, it is this, it is this, it is this. But now they add a second line. If there's heaven on earth, it is this, it is this, it is this. But now it's a veritable hell on earth because of the Indian occupation. That occupation involves 700,000 troops. It is the densest military occupation in the world. There's huge numbers of missing people. 8,000 to 10,000 Kashmiris have gone missing over the last several decades. That's where these unmarked graves play a very significant role, because that's probably where a lot of these bodies have wound up. And so while we learned here, as we should, about the plight of Plaza de Mayo, Madres de Plaza de Mayo, and all the missing in Chile and in Central America, very little attention is paid to a number of missing in Kashmir, which I can say with confidence dwarfs the numbers of Central America and South America. Human rights violations, torture, very common. When you enter the Scareport in Srinagar, it's actually Srinagar, but it is kind of a screamy place. You feel you're entering into a war zone. You have to complete a separate application as to where you're going, who you're going to see, the purpose of this is inside of India. And then you come out of the airport and you're surrounded by concertina wire, barbed wire, guard posts, checkpoints, barricades, kind of like occupied Wall Street. If you go down to Broadway, you'll see this is a police checkpoint, and there's, but this is nothing here. This is almost Eden-esque in comparison. A huge military presence, and they make their presence known. They're not very subtle about it, and they're also not very subtle about injecting Hindu iconography and Hindu religious symbols into the face of these largely Muslim people as a further denigration. We're on top, we're the masters, you're the servants, you're down here. So India is supposed to be a secular state, and therefore its army is supposed to be a secular army, but you go by these checkpoints and garrisons and roadblocks that simply dot the valley. I mean, you can't go more than a few kilometers without hitting some kind of military post where you're asked, you have to come out of your car, you have to show your identification, people are searched, people are hauled away. What happens to them? It's not clear. Laws exist in India and in Kashmir in particular that, to use the adjective draconian, does not describe them adequately. Literally, security forces can disappear people just on the suspicion that they may be terrorists or up to some kind of mischief for 2 years. And that has happened in the many thousands.